One sentence. Soft. Respectful.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'd like to order my meal, please.
The flight attendant's head snapped toward him. Her eyes raked over his skin, his hoodie, his backpack, and her whole face contorted in open disgust.
Order a meal? You? Look at yourself. You're filthy.
She snatched a crumpled Coach snack box and threw it onto his tray.
Peanuts. That's what your kind gets. Be happy I'm giving you anything at all, because trash like you belongs in the cargo hold, not in my cabin.
The passenger beside him howled with laughter. 3 phones shot up, recording, live streaming. The whole cabin watched. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Just grins and whispers. But every person laughing in that cabin had no idea. In just a few minutes, they'd be the ones begging for forgiveness. To understand what happened on that plane, you need to know who was sitting in seat 3A. His name was Franklin Foster, 44 years old, born in a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. His mother cleaned hotel rooms 6 days a week. His father drove a city bus until his knees gave out. Franklin grew up knowing the exact sound of exhaustion: Mama's shoes dragging across the kitchen floor at midnight, Daddy's hands shaking around a coffee mug at 5 in the morning. Nobody handed Franklin anything. He worked through college on a maintenance scholarship, mopping floors between classes. Graduated top of his class in business. Took a job at a tiny regional airline that flew prop planes between cities nobody famous ever visited. Started in the mailroom, literally sorting envelopes and pushing carts. But Franklin could see what a company could become. Within 5 years, he climbed to operations manager. Within 8, VP of strategy. And 12 years ago, when that little airline was drowning in debt, Franklin scraped together everything: savings, loans, investors who believed in him, and bought it. He renamed it SkyVault Airlines. Today, SkyVault is one of the 5 largest domestic carriers in America. 46,000 employees, 300 aircraft, routes to over 120 cities, valued at billions. Franklin Foster owns the majority share. But here's what matters. You would never know it by looking at him. The man drives a 12-year-old Toyota Camry, lives in the same 3-bedroom house he bought at 29 before the money came, wears the same hoodies and sneakers every day. No Rolex, no entourage, no private jet. This isn't a disguise. This is who Franklin is. Forbes once called him the billionaire you'd walk right past on the street. He took it as a compliment. He flies commercial first class on his own airline, not to check on anyone, simply because he doesn't see the need for more. A comfortable seat, a quiet flight, a decent meal, that's enough. That Tuesday morning, Franklin made scrambled eggs for his teenage daughter Nadia in their Brooklyn kitchen. They talked about her history project on the Tuskegee Airmen. He kissed her forehead, grabbed his worn backpack, pulled on a Navy hoodie, and headed to JFK. At the airport, no priority lane, no special treatment, a gate agent scanned his pass without looking up. He bought water from a kiosk, sat near the window, and waited like everyone else. Nobody recognized him. Nobody ever does. Now, on that same flight, SkyVault SV412, JFK to LAX, someone else was worth knowing about. Claudia Hayes, 51, Franklin's chief legal officer and one of his oldest friends. She sat in 5C, a few rows behind him. Both headed to LA for a legal meeting, but Claudia knew Franklin's habits. He liked silence on flights. Headphones on, world off. So she booked separately. From row 5, Claudia had a clear line of sight to first class. She could see Franklin's seat. She could see the galley. She could see everything. She didn't know it yet, but that view was about to become the most important thing on the aircraft. And then there was Brenda Collins, 38, senior flight attendant with Skyvault for 9 years. Employee records said professional and detail-oriented. Her passengers, the ones who looked like her, gave high marks. But behind the polished smile, Brenda had a pattern. 4 previous complaints from passengers of color, 4 times documented. 4 times the system quietly filed them away and did nothing. Before boarding began, Brenda stood in the crew area flipping through the manifest on her tablet. She tapped seat 3A, glanced at the name, and muttered to a colleague, "Another last-minute upgrade, probably." There was no upgrade. Franklin booked first class, full fare. But Brenda had already decided. Nearby, Derek Simmons overheard every word. 52. Hedge fund manager from Greenwich, seat 3B, right next to Franklin. He caught Brenda's eye and smirked. A small nod passed between them. Before the plane left the ground, an alliance had already formed, built on assumption, on prejudice, on the quiet belief that a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong in first class. The cabin doors sealed shut. Engines hummed. Skyvault SV412 pushed back and taxied toward the runway. Franklin put on his headphones, leaned back, and closed his eyes. He had no idea what was coming. Then again, neither did they. The seatbelt sign clicked off with a soft chime. 36,000 feet above the ground, the cabin settled into that familiar hum, recycled air pushing through vents, ice clinking in glasses, the low murmur of passengers adjusting into comfort. In first class, the ritual began. Brenda Collins stepped out of the forward galley pushing a polished service cart. Silver tray covers gleamed under the overhead lights. The smell of butter-seared filet mignon drifted through the cabin like perfume. She moved with rehearsed precision, back straight, smile fixed, every gesture smooth. Row 1A. A white businessman in a tailored suit. Brenda unfolded a warm towel and placed it gently before him. She presented a leather-bound menu, recited the options with the warmth of a personal host, and poured champagne with a slow, elegant tilt. "Take your time, sir. I'll be right here when you're ready." Row 2A. Same ritual. Warm towel, menu, champagne. A soft laugh at the passenger's joke. Row 2B. Towel, menu, wine. A warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Then she reached row 3. Seat 3B. Derek Simmons. Brenda's demeanor brightened like a switch had flipped. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to first class." Towel placed like a gift. Menu opened with care. Champagne poured with a lingering tilt. "The filet mignon tonight is exceptional. Dry-aged, butter-basted. I personally recommend it with Bordeaux." Derek adjusted his cufflinks. "Now that's what I call service." Brenda beamed. "You deserve nothing less, sir." And then, seat 3A, Franklin Foster. Brenda didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't glance sideways. She pushed her cart past 3A as if the seat were empty, as if no human being were sitting there. The wheels squeaked softly on the cabin floor. The scent of warm bread trailed behind her like a taunt only Franklin could smell. Row 4. Towel, menu, champagne. The same greeting, the same radiant smile. She even rested her hand briefly on the passenger's shoulder, a small human touch that said, "You matter." Franklin watched her go. He heard the towel unfold behind him, heard the champagne pour, heard the soft "good evening" she gave to every passenger in the cabin. Everyone except him. He looked down at his tray table. Empty. Bare beige plastic. No towel. No menu. No glass. Around him, the sounds of first class swelled. Silverware on porcelain. Wine swirling in crystal. The satisfied murmur of passengers beginning their meals. Franklin sat in the center of it all with nothing. He waited. Maybe she forgot. Anyone can miss a seat. Flights are busy. People make mistakes. He told himself that. He'd give her a minute. He was a patient man. He'd always been patient. 5 minutes passed. The passenger in 1A finished his appetizer, seared scallop on microgreens. Franklin could smell the lemon butter from 2 rows away. 10 minutes. The couple in row 2 clinked glasses over shrimp cocktail. Brenda appeared beside them with a warm bread basket and whipped herb butter. 15 minutes. Derek Simmons beside him sliced into golden-crusted filet mignon. The knife cut through with no resistance. Juices pooled on the white plate, rich, dark, glistening. The scrape of knife on porcelain cut through the cabin like a whisper, meant only for Franklin. Franklin's tray was still empty. He raised his hand as Brenda passed with a fresh wine bottle. "Excuse me, ma'am. I think you may have missed me. I'd like to see the menu, please." Brenda stopped. She turned slowly. Her eyes traveled from his sneakers, up his faded jeans, across his hoodie, and finally to his face. She held there, studying him, measuring him. "I'll get to you," she said. No warmth, no eye contact. She turned and walked away, the wine bottle cradled in her arm like something precious she needed to protect from him. She didn't come back. 10 more minutes crawled by. Franklin could hear everything with painful clarity. Dessert forks clinking against fine china, a cognac bottle popping open with a rich, hollow sound, amber liquid pouring into crystal snifters, the warm laughter of passengers fully served and deeply satisfied. The cabin smelled like a 5-star restaurant, and he was sitting in the middle of it, invisible. His tray was bare. The flight attendant assigned to his cabin was treating him like he didn't exist. Franklin pressed the call button. The soft chime rang above his seat. Brenda appeared from the galley, arms crossed, jaw tight. She stood over him the way a principal stands over a misbehaving child. "Yes?" "I'd like to order my meal, please," Franklin said. Calm, measured, the kind of calm that takes real effort when your dignity is being stripped away. Brenda stared at him. Then she turned, walked to the galley, and came back carrying a small cardboard box, a coach-class snack box. She set it on his tray with a firm thud. Inside, a granola bar, a packet of peanuts, and a miniature juice box. The kind they hand out in row 38 between the bathroom and the engine noise. Franklin looked at the box, then up at Brenda. Around him, every first-class passenger dined on filet mignon, seared salmon, chocolate lava cake. Crystal glasses caught the light. Cloth napkins folded into triangles rested on laps. Warm bread baskets sat beside dishes of whipped butter. In front of Franklin, a cardboard box with a granola bar. Brenda folded her arms and said it loud enough for the entire cabin. "The first-class meal is for first-class passengers. I don't know how you ended up here, but until we sort it out, this is what you get." She tapped the box with one painted fingernail. "Be grateful." Derek leaned back in 3B, filet mignon still on his fork. He looked at the snack box, then at Franklin, and chuckled slowly. He shook his head with theatrical disappointment. Then he turned to Brenda with approving eyes, the look of a man watching someone handle a nuisance. "Good call," he murmured. "Standards matter." Franklin didn't touch the box. Hands on the armrests, he spoke in a voice so steady it could have leveled a courtroom. "I paid for a first-class ticket. I'm in my assigned seat. I would like the meal I paid for." Brenda tilted her head. The corner of her mouth lifted into something cruel. "Sir, anyone can sit in a seat. That doesn't mean you belong in it." She stepped closer. I've been doing this 9 years. I know who belongs up here and who wandered in by mistake. Her voice dropped. And sweetheart? You don't. She straightened up and glanced at Derek. I'm verifying your booking with the gate. If there's a system error, and I'm certain there is, you'll move back to coach. Until then, enjoy your peanuts. She walked away without waiting for a response. Franklin looked at the cardboard box. Granola bar, peanuts, juice box. It sat crooked on his tray, cheap and small, surrounded by the scent of butter, garlic, warm chocolate, all served to everyone in this cabin except him. The elderly black couple in row 5 had watched every second. The woman, silver hair in a tight bun, gripped her husband's hand until her knuckles went white. Her husband sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a stillness born from decades of swallowing this exact moment. Across the aisle, a white woman in her 40s, linen blazer, pearl earrings, watched with visible discomfort. Her fork hovered over her plate. She looked at Franklin. She looked at the snack box. She looked at her own filet mignon still steaming. She set her fork down. She said nothing. 2 rows back, a young man in a baseball cap aimed his phone at Franklin. Not to help, to share. His grin was wide and ugly. He whispered to the girl beside him. Yo, this is gold. Gonna blow up online. She giggled and leaned in to watch his screen. Not one person in first class spoke a word in Franklin's defense. In seat 5C, Claudia Hayes had witnessed every moment with the precision of the lawyer she was. Every skipped service, every glance, the snack box, the words, the laughter. She cataloged it all. She typed a text to Franklin. Want me to step in? Franklin felt his phone vibrate. He read the message. His thumb hovered. 2 words back. Not yet. He slid the phone into the seat pocket, camera facing outward, and pressed record. The snack box sat untouched on his tray. The cabin hummed with the sounds of people eating meals they were served without question, without hesitation, without a single moment of doubt about whether they deserved to be sitting where they sat. And Franklin Foster, the man who built this airline from nothing, who owned every seat, every engine, every wing on this aircraft, sat in perfect silence, recording everything. Waiting. The granola bar in the cardboard box caught the overhead light. It almost looked like it was mocking him. 5 minutes after Brenda walked away, Franklin raised his hand again. He didn't raise his voice, didn't stand up. He simply lifted his right hand and waited. Brenda saw him from the galley. She took her time, refilled Derek's water first, hazarded a napkin on row 2, checked her tablet. Then she strolled toward 3A with the heavy steps of someone deeply inconvenienced. What now? I'd like my meal, Franklin said. Same calm. I've asked 3 times. I've been here over 40 minutes, while every other passenger has been served. Brenda let out a long breath through her nose. She looked at him the way someone looks at a stain on expensive carpet. And I already told you. We're verifying. Maybe if you hadn't snuck into a seat that doesn't belong to you, we wouldn't have this problem. I didn't sneak anywhere. This is my seat, 3A. My name is on the booking. Brenda leaned in, close enough that Franklin could smell the coffee on her breath. Her voice dropped to something sharp and venomous. Listen to me carefully. I don't care what name is on that booking. I don't care what little confirmation code you pulled up on your cracked phone screen. I've worked this cabin for 9 years. I know exactly who pays full fare for first class and who gets lucky with a glitch. She pointed one finger at his chest. You are a glitch. She straightened up. Her voice returned to performance volume, loud enough for the rows around them. Now sit quietly, eat your peanuts, and wait. Unless you'd rather I call the captain right now and explain that we have a passenger making threats over a meal." "I haven't made a single threat," Franklin said. "That's your version," Brenda snapped. "I have 12 passengers who see a man causing a scene because he can't accept where he belongs." Derek set down his cognac and leaned toward Franklin with the casual confidence of a man who had never been questioned about his right to be anywhere. "Buddy, whatever mix-up got you up here, just let it go. Sit and coach, enjoy the flight. Stop making this harder than it needs to be." He wrinkled his nose. "And honestly, some of us are trying to eat. The smell alone is killing my appetite." He said it like a favor, like he was doing Franklin a kindness. Like removing a black man from first class was an act of community service. A few passengers nearby nodded along. Small, cowardly nods. The kind people give when they agree but don't want to be quoted. Franklin's jaw tightened. A muscle in his temple flickered. But his voice held. "I'm not moving." That was when Brenda reached up to the overhead bin above 3A and placed her hand on the latch. "Then let me help you pack. Don't touch my belongings." Low and precise, each word a boundary drawn in the air. Brenda's hand froze. Something flickered across her face, surprise that he pushed back. It vanished fast, replaced by something harder. "Fine. Have it your way." She turned toward the galley, but she didn't go get his meal. She picked up the intercom handset, pressed the cockpit button, and spoke in a voice designed to be overheard. "Captain Reynolds, this is Brenda Collins in the forward cabin. I have a non-compliant passenger in 3A. He's been asked multiple times to cooperate and has refused. He is raising his voice, creating a hostile atmosphere, and making passengers feel unsafe. Requesting security meet the aircraft on arrival." Every word was a lie. Franklin hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't created anything hostile. He'd asked for a meal and sat quietly when denied. But Brenda knew the weight of non-compliant. She knew what hostile atmosphere triggered in airline protocol. She knew that once those words reached the cockpit, a chain reaction would start that Franklin couldn't stop. The captain's voice crackled back, calm, procedural, trusting his crew. "Copy that. I'll notify LAX ground ops. Security will meet at the gate." Brenda hung up and turned toward the cabin. She didn't hide the satisfaction on her face. At that moment, Gail Patterson appeared from the rear cabin. Gail, mid-40s, 15 years with Skyvault, the kind of flight attendant who still believed the job meant caring for all people. She had been watching from the divider curtain for 20 minutes. She pulled Brenda aside near the galley, voice low and urgent. "Brenda, I checked the manifest. Seat 3A, Franklin Foster, confirmed. Full fare first class, paid in full. No upgrade, no glitch, no error. He belongs in that seat." Brenda didn't blink. "I'm handling this, Gail." "You're not handling anything. You skipped him during service. You gave him a coach snack box. Now you've called the cockpit. For what? Because he asked for his meal?" "I said I'm handling it." Ice in every syllable. "This is my cabin. Go back to economy where you belong." Gail stared for a long moment. Her nostrils flared. Then she stepped back, pulled a notepad from her apron, and began writing. Date, time, Brenda's exact words, every detail witnessed. Her hand was steady. Her eyes were not. She underlined one word twice. Refused. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted. The word security hung in the recycled air like smoke. Passengers who had been pretending not to notice were now openly staring at Franklin. The elderly black woman in row 5 had tears running silently down her cheeks. Her husband held her hand with both of his own eyes glistening. Derek pulled out his phone. He aimed the camera at Franklin's face and started recording. His voice was narrator smooth, almost cheerful. So we've got a situation in first class. Passenger in 3A's been asked to cooperate and is refusing. Getting aggressive about the food. Crew had to call the captain. Security meeting us at LAX. Kind of wild. He was building a narrative, frame by frame. In his version, Franklin was the villain, the angry black man causing problems at 36,000 feet. If that video hit the internet before the truth did, Franklin would be convicted by the public before he ever opened his mouth. The young man in the baseball cap 2 rows back was still live streaming. Viewer count climbing, comments scrolling. Some shocked, some laughing, some egging it on. The girl beside him whispered, "He's definitely getting arrested," and giggled. Not one ally in the entire cabin. Not one voice raised in his defense. The white woman across the aisle, the one with pearl earrings who had set her fork down earlier, stared at her lap. She gripped her own hands together. She knew what she was watching was wrong. Everyone knew. But knowing and speaking are two very different things at 36,000 feet when you're comfortable and the person suffering doesn't look like you. From seat 5C, Claudia Hayes had witnessed every moment. The denial, the snack box, the lie to the cockpit, Gale being shut down, Derek's camera. Her legal mind was building the case already, but beyond the law, her friend was being humiliated while an entire cabin watched. She stood up, walked forward, stopped at row 3, and spoke clearly. "My name is Claudia Hayes. I'm a licensed attorney representing this man. What I've witnessed constitutes discriminatory denial of service, verbal harassment, and a fraudulent report to the flight deck. I formally advise you to cease contact with my client and restore his service immediately." Dead silence. Even the engine hum seemed to fade. Brenda blinked, recovered, lifted her chin, and pointed toward the back. "Ma'am, I don't care if you're the Attorney General. Return to your seat or I'll add you to the security report." Claudia held eye contact for 3 seconds. Then she walked back to 5C, sat down, opened her laptop, and began typing. Her fingers moved like weapons on the keyboard. Franklin watched her return. He gave the smallest nod, visible only to her. It said, "Thank you." But not yet. Almost. Brenda smoothed her vest, fixed her hair, and addressed first class with a bright smile, as if nothing had happened. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin descent into Los Angeles in about 90 minutes. Can I refresh anyone's drink?" She looked at Derek, at row 2, at row 1. She did not look at Franklin, not once, as if erasing him from the cabin entirely was the final move in a game she believed she had already won. The snack box sat on his tray, untouched. The granola wrapper caught the overhead light. Somewhere over the middle of America, a man sat alone in a full cabin, denied a meal, denied water, denied basic dignity, while the woman who did it poured champagne for everyone else. Franklin looked at the snack box one last time. Then he looked at Brenda, who was laughing softly with Derek over a fresh pour of cognac. He looked at the phones aimed at his face. He looked at the cabin full of people who had already decided he was the problem. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Not the one recording in the seat pocket, his personal phone. He scrolled through his contacts with a calm thumb, found the name he needed, and pressed call. 2 rings. "Nathan, it's Franklin." On the other end, Nathan Moore, Skyvault Airline's head of operations, sitting in his corner office in Dallas. He straightened up the moment he heard the voice. "Franklin, what's going on?" "I'm on SV412, seat 3A, JFK to LAX. Franklin's voice was low, measured, and absolutely steady. I need you to contact Captain Reynolds in the cockpit directly, right now. Let him know who's sitting in this seat. A pause. Nathan's chair creaked. And Nathan, pull the full service records for the cabin crew on this flight. All of them, before we land. Done. Give me 2 minutes. Franklin hung up. He set the phone on his armrest, face down, and folded his hands in his lap. Brenda had watched him make the call from the galley doorway. She rolled her eyes and muttered something to herself. Another bluff. Another desperate move from a man who didn't belong. She'd seen it before. Passengers threatening to call someone important. It never meant anything. She went back to wiping down the counter. 90 seconds passed. Then the cockpit phone rang. Captain Reynolds picked up. The first-class cabin was quiet enough that passengers in the front rows could hear the faint murmur of his voice through the door. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. Then came a sound no one on that plane expected. The cockpit door opened. Captain Reynolds stepped out. Full uniform, 4 stripes on each shoulder, silver hair cropped short. He was a 30-year veteran, the kind of pilot who never left the cockpit mid-flight unless something serious was happening. He walked through the first-class cabin with long, deliberate strides. He didn't look left or right. His eyes were locked on one seat, 3A. He stopped directly in front of Franklin. The entire cabin was watching now. Derek lowered his phone slowly. The live-streaming kid in the baseball cap leaned forward. The elderly couple in row 5 held their breath. Captain Reynolds spoke. His voice carried the weight of a man who understood exactly what had happened, and exactly how badly his crew had failed. Mr. Foster, on behalf of myself and the entire crew of this aircraft, I sincerely apologize. Whatever you need, sir, it will be taken care of immediately. Silence. Total, crushing silence. Derek's mouth fell open. His phone hand dropped to his lap. Brenda stepped forward from the galley, confusion breaking through her composure. Captain, what's happening? I reported a non-compliant passenger. I filed. Captain Reynolds turned to face her. His expression could have frozen jet fuel. Ms. Collins. Each word landed like a stone dropped on glass. The man sitting in seat 3A is Franklin Foster. He is the founder, CEO, and majority owner of Skyvault Airlines. He let that sentence hang in the air. He is, in the most literal sense possible, your employer. The person who signs every paycheck that funds every crew member on this aircraft, including yours. The cabin didn't gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was the sound of 12 people simultaneously stopping breathing. A vacuum of shock that sucked every other sound out of the air. Brenda's face drained, not slowly, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug beneath her skin and everything warm rushed out. Her lips parted, but nothing came. Her hands began to tremble at her sides. She looked at Franklin, really looked at him for the first time, and saw the hoodie, the backpack, the sneakers. The same man, the same seat. But everything had changed. You are relieved of service for the remainder of this flight, Captain Reynolds continued. Report to the aft galley immediately. Do not interact with any passenger in this cabin. HR and operations will be waiting when we land. Brenda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. A sound came out, something between a word and a whimper. Then she turned and walked toward the back of the plane. Her heels clicked against the floor in an uneven rhythm. Her shoulders were shaking. Derek Simmons sat frozen in 3B. His face had gone from smug to gray. He fumbled with his phone, trying to stop the recording, fingers clumsy and panicked. Listen, I had no idea. I didn't know who. Franklin didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge a single syllable. Captain Reynolds nodded to Franklin once more, then returned to the cockpit. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Within moments, Gail Patterson appeared from the rear cabin. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. She stepped to row 3A and spoke softly. "Mr. Foster, I'm so sorry." "May I take this?" She reached for the snack box, the crumpled cardboard box with the granola bar and the peanuts and the tiny juice box that had been sitting on his tray for over an hour. Franklin nodded. Gail lifted it off the tray and carried it away like it was evidence. Because it was. Then Gail returned. She unfolded a warm towel and placed it before Franklin. She presented the leather-bound menu. She poured champagne into a crystal flute, the same champagne everyone else had been drinking since the flight began. She served him the filet mignon, butter-basted, golden crust. The knife slid through without resistance. Steam rose from the plate carrying the scent of garlic and rosemary. She placed a cloth napkin on his lap, a bread basket beside his plate, a glass of Bordeaux next to the champagne. The full, first-class service. Every detail, every courtesy. Everything that should have been his from the very beginning. The cabin watched in absolute silence. Nobody ate. Nobody drank. Nobody moved. And Franklin Foster, in his hoodie, with his backpack tucked under the seat, finally had his meal. Franklin ate in silence. He cut his steak slowly. He sipped his wine. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He simply ate the meal he had paid for, in the seat he had paid for, on the airline he had built from nothing. Around him, the cabin had transformed. The same passengers who had laughed, recorded, and looked away were now frozen in their seats. Nobody made eye contact with Franklin. Nobody made eye contact with each other. The air felt different, heavier, thicker, like the pressure had changed and everyone's ears were ringing from something they couldn't name. Shame. That's what it was. Shame had flooded the cabin at 36,000 feet, and there was nowhere to hide from it. Derek Simmons sat in 3B like a man strapped to an electric chair waiting for the switch. His cognac sat untouched. His dessert plate, the chocolate lava cake Brenda had served him with such theatrical warmth, had gone cold. A thin skin had formed over the chocolate. He stared at it without seeing it. His phone sat face down on his thigh. The video he had recorded, the one where he narrated Franklin as an aggressive, non-compliant troublemaker, was still saved in his camera roll. 12 minutes of footage that could end his career, his reputation, his entire public life. And he knew it. He opened his mouth twice to speak to Franklin. Both times, nothing came out. The third time, he managed a strangled whisper. "Mr. Foster, I want to sincerely..." Franklin took a sip of Bordeaux. He didn't turn his head, didn't blink. He continued eating as if 3B were empty. Derek closed his mouth and didn't open it again for the rest of the flight. In the aft galley, behind the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the world, Brenda Collins was falling apart. She stood with her back against the cold aluminum wall of the service station. Her vest was unbuttoned. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She was talking, fast, breathless, scattered, to Gail Patterson, who stood across from her with crossed arms and a face made of stone. "I didn't know, Gail. How was I supposed to know? He looked like... he was wearing a hoodie. A hoodie. In first class. Anyone would have... You would have thought the same thing. No, Gail said. I wouldn't have. I was just following procedure. There are protocols for verification. I was doing my job. Your job is to serve passengers, Brenda. All of them. You didn't verify anything. I told you his ticket was confirmed. You ignored me. You didn't check the manifest once. Not once. Brenda's voice cracked. It was a judgment call. It was judgment, all right. Gail's voice was quiet, but it cut deep. Just not the professional kind. Brenda slid down the wall until she was sitting on the galley floor. Her knees pulled up to her chest. Mascara tracked down both cheeks. She whispered something to herself. Something about 9 years. About her record. About how this couldn't be happening. But it was happening. And the evidence was everywhere. When the wheels of Skyvault SV412 touched the runway at LAX, the cabin jolted with the familiar screech of rubber on asphalt. But nobody reached for their overhead bins. Nobody unbuckled in a rush. The first-class cabin stayed seated, quiet, waiting, as if they all understood that what came next wasn't going to be ordinary. The plane taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The cabin door opened. Standing in the jet bridge were 2 Skyvault corporate HR representatives in dark suits, holding tablets. Behind them, Nathan Moore, head of operations, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He had flown in from Dallas on a company jet that landed 40 minutes before SV412. Brenda was escorted off the plane first. She walked between the 2 HR reps with her head down, clutching her crew bag against her chest like a shield. She didn't look back. The jet bridge echoed with the click of her heels, unsteady now, arrhythmic, nothing like the confident stride she'd had 6 hours ago. She was taken to a private room near the gate. The door closed. She was informed that she was suspended immediately, effective that moment, pending a full investigation. Her crew badge was collected. Her access credentials were deactivated before she left the room. Derek Simmons tried to disappear. He waited until most passengers had exited, then slipped into the jet bridge with his head low and his collar up. He walked fast, eyes on the floor. But Franklin was standing right there. Backpack on one shoulder, phone in his pocket, calm as morning. Derek tried to slide past without being seen. Franklin's voice stopped him. "Mr. Simmons?" Derek froze. "That video you recorded of me, keep it. My legal team is going to need a copy." The color drained from Derek's face for the second time that day. He opened his mouth, closed it, and walked away without a word. His leather shoes clicked rapidly against the jet bridge floor, the sound of a man trying to outrun something that had already caught him. Franklin watched him go. Then he turned to Nathan Moore, who was waiting by the gate desk. "Nathan, I want every complaint filed by passengers of color on Skyvault in the last 3 years. Every single one. Full audit. No exceptions." Nathan nodded. "Already started." Franklin adjusted his backpack. He walked through the terminal like everyone else. Hoodie, sneakers, no entourage. He stopped at a quiet corner near baggage claim and called his daughter. "Hey, baby. Flight was fine. I'll tell you about it later." He hung up, leaned against the wall, stared at the ceiling. The hoodie, the backpack, the quiet rage behind steady eyes. He looked like any other tired passenger at the end of a long flight, and that, of course, was the whole problem. The investigation began before sunrise the next morning. At Skyvault headquarters in Dallas, a 14th floor conference room became a war room. Nathan Moore sat at the head of a long table, HR, legal, operations, and one independent investigator hired overnight. The fluorescent lights hummed above stacks of printed reports. Coffee cups multiplied by the hour. Nobody had slept well. First, they pulled the security camera footage from SV-412's forward cabin. 4 angles, high definition, time-stamped to the second. The footage showed everything. Brenda serving every passenger with warmth and walking past 3A without a glance. The snack box dropped on Franklin's tray, her finger at his chest, the intercom call to the cockpit. Gail showing the manifest and being waved off. Every frame confirmed what Franklin described. Every frame contradicted what Brenda claimed. Then came Franklin's recording from the seat pocket. 14 minutes of uninterrupted footage. Brenda's voice, Derek's comments, the laughter, the painful silence of bystanders, and Claudia's legal warning being dismissed. Then Gail's handwritten incident report. 3 pages, single-spaced, with timestamps, direct quotes, and a final line that made the entire room go silent. In 15 years of service, I have never witnessed a crew member deliberately deny service based on appearance. That is what I witnessed today. Then passenger statements. 5 passengers contacted Skyvault within 24 hours of landing. 3 described witnessing clear discriminatory treatment. The white woman with pearl earrings, the one who had set her fork down but said nothing on the plane, wrote a 2-page email ending with, "I said nothing, and I am ashamed. But I am saying something now." The evidence was overwhelming, airtight, undeniable. Within 48 hours, Brenda Collins was terminated. The termination letter cited discriminatory denial of service, fabrication of a security report, insubordination toward a fellow crew member, and conduct unbecoming a Skyvault employee. Her 9-year record meant nothing against what the cameras had captured. Union Representative Russell Crawford reviewed the evidence in a closed session. He watched the cabin recording twice without speaking. Then he closed his folder and said quietly, "We won't be contesting this." He didn't look up when he said it. The FAA was notified per airline conduct regulations. Brenda's file was permanently flagged in the National Crew Database, a mark that would follow her to any airline she ever applied to for the rest of her career. But the investigation didn't stop with Brenda. When Nathan's team pulled the complaint history, every grievance filed by passengers of color on Skyvault over the past 3 years, what they found was sickening. 112 complaints. 43 specifically described being denied service, questioned about their seat, or treated with open hostility. 4 named Brenda Collins directly. 4 complaints, 4 passengers of color, 4 separate flights. All documented, all filed through proper channels, all quietly absorbed by the system and buried. Never escalated, never investigated, never acted upon. The system didn't fail. It worked exactly as it was designed, to protect itself and ignore the people it was supposed to serve. Franklin read the report at 2 a.m. in his LA hotel room, laptop open on the bed, hoodie still on, blue light casting shadows across his face. He read each complaint slowly. One was from a mother flying with her 8-year-old son, who had been told to go back to economy where you people are more comfortable. He closed the laptop, pressed his palms against his eyes, sat in the dark for a long time. This wasn't about one flight attendant. This was a system that had learned to look the other way. Meanwhile, Derek Simmons was discovering his problems were only beginning. His video, narrating Franklin as an aggressive troublemaker, hadn't stayed on his phone. He'd texted it to 3 friends before landing. One posted it online. "My buddy caught this crazy guy on his flight, LOL." Within hours, comments identified the crazy guy as Franklin Foster, CEO of Skyvault Airlines. The original video was played alongside Franklin's recording, side by side, 2 versions of the same event. One was a lie. The other was truth. The contrast was devastating. Derek's name surfaced within a day. His firm, his title, his LinkedIn. Claudia Hayes filed a formal defamation and harassment lawsuit on Franklin's behalf. Derek's firm issued a panicked statement about not condoning personal actions of individual employees, the corporate equivalent of sprinting for the exits. Derek offered a private apology through attorneys. Claudia rejected it. They wanted a public statement. Derek refused. The lawsuit moved forward. 2 months later, Derek quietly resigned from his firm's public-facing role as part of an out-of-court settlement. The terms were sealed. His reputation was not. Then came the media. The story broke on social media first. Passenger clips, Franklin's recording, and one photograph of the snack box on his tray captioned, "This is what Skyvault serves a black man in first class." That single image was shared over 2 million times in 48 hours. Denise Taylor ran the story on the evening news. She held up the snack box screenshot while filet mignon plates glowed in the background. The image said everything words couldn't. The hashtag #FlyWhileBlack trended nationally for 3 consecutive days. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements. 2 congresswomen called for a federal review of discriminatory practices in commercial aviation. Brenda gave a tearful interview from her living room couch. No makeup, shaking voice. She said the words people always say when the cameras find them. "I'm not a racist. I made a mistake in judgment. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the footage showed a woman who didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. Over and over again. The public saw through every single word. Comments were merciless. The clip was buried within hours. 1 week later, Franklin held a press conference at Skyvault headquarters. He stood behind the podium in his navy hoodie. No suit, no notes, no teleprompter. He didn't play victim. He spoke as a CEO who had found a failure inside his own company and intended to fix it personally. He announced a complete overhaul of bias training. A new anonymous complaint portal monitored by an independent review board. Quarterly equity audits across every route and cabin class. A formal partnership with 2 national civil rights organizations to develop industry-wide service standards. And one more thing. Gail Patterson had been promoted to lead cabin crew trainer, heading the new equity and service integrity program that Franklin personally funded. Gail stood beside him at the podium. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had already said everything that mattered, with a notepad, a steady hand, and the courage to write the truth when everyone around her chose silence. 6 months later, the Skyvault Airlines logo hung behind a stage in a ballroom at the Javits Center in New York City. 300 people filled the seats. Airline executives, civil rights leaders, flight attendants, journalists, and passengers who had traveled from across the country to be there. It was the first annual Open Skies Summit, a conference on equity in air travel that had never existed before, because no airline had ever cared enough to create it. Franklin Foster walked onto the stage in his navy hoodie. No suit, no tie, no teleprompter. Just him and a microphone. The room fell quiet before he said a single word. He told the story from the beginning. Not the press conference version, not the headline version, the real version. He talked about sitting in 3A and watching every passenger around him get served while his tray sat empty. He talked about the snack box, the crumpled cardboard, the granola bar, the tiny juice box, and how it felt to have it dropped in front of him like scraps for an animal. He talked about the moment Brenda took his water glass away. He paused there. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Then he talked about his daughter, Nadia. "She's 16, he said. She flies on my airline, and I built that airline so people like her could travel with dignity, so she'd never have to sit in a seat she paid for and be told she doesn't belong." He gripped the podium with both hands. But the truth is, I can't protect her from what happened to me. Not yet. Because what happened on that plane wasn't about one flight attendant. It was about a system that teaches people to look at someone's skin, someone's clothes, someone's shoes, and decide in 3 seconds whether they deserve to be treated like a human being. The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. Some were crying. Some were nodding with the slow, heavy recognition of people who had lived this story in their own bodies, on their own flights, in their own lives. Franklin stepped back from the podium. Gail Patterson stood in the front row. Their eyes met. He gave her a single nod, the same quiet nod he'd given Claudia on the plane. It meant the same thing it always meant with Franklin. Thank you. For seeing.
For writing it down. For refusing to stay silent. In the months that followed, SkyVault's reforms rippled across the industry. 2 other major carriers adopted anonymous passenger complaint portals modeled on SkyVault's system. The FAA opened a formal review of discriminatory service practices on domestic airlines, the first of its kind in over a decade. 3 universities added the SkyVault incident to their civil rights curriculum as a case study. And in a quiet apartment in Queens, Brenda Collins sat on her couch watching the summit coverage on the evening news. The camera panned across the audience, then back to Franklin at the podium in his hoodie. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she turned the television off and sat in the dark. Some lessons arrive too late to undo what was done. But they arrive all the same. That's the choice. Every single time. Every single day. So let me ask you, have you ever been denied something you paid for and you knew exactly why? Or have you ever watched it happen to someone else and wished you'd spoken up? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. If this story made you stop and think, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because the next story is coming, and trust me, it hits even harder. Because at the end of the day, justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it starts with one person who